hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person.
Welcome to the Parable Podcast. Thanks for joining Family Life on-air host Randy Snavely as he digs into the story lessons taught by the world's greatest teacher, Jesus. In this episode, it's part 1 of What You See is Not What You Get. The message Christ shared in Matthew 15, verses 10 through 20, is that it's what comes from the inside that defiles a person, not what the world sees on the outside.
Han van Meegeren was an artist with a grudge. Painting in the Netherlands pre-World War II, critics mercilessly panned his exhibitions. One critic described him as, quote, a gifted technician who has made a sort of composite facsimile of the Renaissance school. He has every virtue except originality. After that stinging rebuke, Van Meegeren decided to strike back. He painted a work with flourish in the style of the great Dutch artist Johan Vermeer and titled it The Supper at Emmaus. Van Meegeren got a lawyer friend to submit it to the prominent critic Abraham Bredius, and Bredius wrote in the Burlington Magazine, which was the art bible of the day, "It is a wonderful moment in the life of a lover of art when he finds himself suddenly confronted with a hitherto unknown painting by a great master, untouched, on the original canvas and without any restoration, just as it left the painter's studio. And what a picture! We have here I am inclined to say, the masterpiece of Johan Vermeer of Delft." Well, the art world gasped. Bredius was known as the Pope in the art world, so this painting was sold for the equivalent of millions of dollars and displayed in the Boijmans Gallery in Rotterdam, Holland. It was perhaps the greatest hoax in art history. Han van Meegeren planned to expose the forgery at the opening of the gallery's 400 Years of European Art exhibition, in which his forgery was given a prestigious place of honor. His critics would be humiliated and their reputations shattered. However, the pull to greed was stronger than the pull to revenge. Rather than exposing the forgery, Van Meegeren chose to make money by keeping the charade going. In the process, he raked in millions of dollars. When the Nazis swept through Europe, he sold The Supper at Emmaus to them, and that almost proved to be his undoing. After the war, the Allied forces were determined to return the artworks collected by the Nazis to their previous owners. A receipt led 2 soldiers to the studio of Van Meegeren. They wanted to know who he had bought the artwork from. Because he was unwilling to come clean, Van Meegeren was arrested on charges of treason and faced the death penalty. Confined in prison, facing death, Van Meegeren had a change of heart. But when he confessed, no one believed him. Experts testified that the work was indeed an original by the Dutch master Vermeer. The only way to prove his innocence was to produce another fake. So Van Meegeren did, spending weeks literally painting for his life. Well, the final twist to the story is that Van Meegeren was not only acquitted, but he became a national hero because he had fooled the Nazis and in the process showed how corrupt they were. Van Meegeren was set free and celebrated by everyone, except, of course, by the critics he had fooled. Greed, jealousy, pride, selfishness, revenge, deception, anger. That story has it all. And sadly, our hearts have all of that too. Jeremiah tells us our hearts are desperately wicked. It's like a cesspool waiting to boil over and spew its ugly gunk out. What are we to do about that? You are listening to part 1 of Family Life Ministries' Parable Podcast, What You See Is Not What You Get. It's taken from Matthew 15, verses 10 through 20. Jesus is speaking in Matthew 15, beginning at verse 10, and he called the people to him and said to them, "Hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person." Then the disciples came and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying?" He answered, "Every plant that my Father has not planted will be rooted up. Let them alone. They are blind guides, and if the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit." But Peter said to him, "Explain the parable to us." And he said, "Are you also still without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is expelled? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile anyone." As Jesus begins this parable, the crowd of people gathered have probably heard the confrontation he had with the Pharisees in the first 9 verses of this chapter. They're upset that Jesus' followers are not following Jewish traditions. Because the disciples are not washing their hands before they eat, not doing the ceremonial cleansing, the Pharisees believe the disciples are sinning. They are defiling themselves. It was supposed to be a gotcha moment. The Pharisees thought they had just caught Jesus doing something very wrong, and they wanted all to see. But Jesus flips the script. He counters the Pharisees' accusation by asking them, "Why are you violating God's commandments for the sake of your traditions? You have needy parents, but instead of giving them some money to help them out, you come up with a man-made rule about it being okay to hold on to your money because eventually it will all go to God. How is that honoring and respecting your parents?" When there's no response, Jesus calls them frauds and hypocrites because they are more interested in lip service than life service. They are more interested in showing off their outward acts of religiosity instead of working on their inner needs and shortcomings. After this exchange, Jesus tells the crowd to come closer to him because he really wants them to hear and understand what he is about to say.
This has been the Parable Podcast with Randy Snavely. Click the subscribe button and you'll automatically be notified when new episodes are released. And be sure to check out Family Life's other original podcasts, such as Therese Talk, If That Makes Sense, and Rise Up with Steve, Therese, and Tim. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Your financial partnership makes podcasts like this possible. Learn more at familylife.org.